Afternoon, everyone. My name is Colonel Lincoln Farish, formerly the 415th and 352 before that. This is a pipock, traditional symbol of civil affairs, first brought about by Lewis and Clark in their expedition, and it shows the dichotomy of civil affairs, where we discuss peace or not. When I was at 352, I was tasked with bringing a bunch of new captains and senior lieutenants up to speed on what it meant to conduct civil affairs. So I contacted some of my friends down at SWCC, and I got with them the rubric of what they were teaching. I went a little bit further. I went to the philosophy. What does it mean when you talk about sovereignty? What is sovereign? What is governance? How do subgroups, subcultures within a group either increase the legitimacy or decrease the legitimacy of a government? What is the legitimate government? How is that decided? How do you get these things? How do you understand them? And so I began putting together a bunch of presentations. And they worked because everyone I taught made it across the stage. Now, as a further incentive, I did tell them I would give them one of these. And I still owe two. I know who you are. You will get them. So I owe two of these pipocks, but everybody I taught made it across the stage. 100% success rate, yay me. When I took over 415th, I continued sending people down, and I expanded my coursework to include some OPD, because personally I was tired of sitting at OPD classes that were taught by the one on how to properly fill out a DA 4187. So I took it upon myself to do something better. You probably should do that at your own unit too. If you're the expert on something, teach it to everybody. Let them know. Give them the benefit of your wisdom. So went through that, and over time people were like, hey, Colonel Farish, can I get a copy of that? And I'm like, sure. So that's kind of why I put these together. Now remember, this is not endorsed by DOD or USACAPOC or SWCC. Everybody knows it works, but it's not endorsed by them. Now, if you make it across the stage, your boss should be there. He or she should be there to greet you, shake your hand, and give you something cool. Biggest day in your civil affairs career. You have made it through. Not an easy task. Lots of people are very good physically. They'll pass all the tests. They'll get out there to Schloss-Teller, or the new name that they've got for it now, and someone will shake their hand and say, you know what, you're a great soldier, but this is not the job for you. And they are doing you a favor. They're doing everyone a favor, because it's not like infantry. It's not like armor where there's one right decision. There's lots of decisions that are okay in civil affairs. There are lots of decisions that are just bad. You've got to be able to figure those out. And remember, there's never a solution. There's a compromise. No matter what you do, something's not going to be perfect. And you've got to find the best, not perfect solution. That is not easy, especially when you're tired and you're dragging around your rucksack and it's hot and the bugs down in North Carolina are eating you alive. It is not easy. But if you make it across that stage, you should be damn well proud. And your boss should be there to greet you. Or feel free to invite me. I will come down there and I'll bring you something nice. So let's get on with these presentations, and I hope you enjoy them. Afternoon. Let's talk civil affairs history. I created this when I was in command of the 415th, hence the focus. The single most important date here is 17 August 1955. That's CA's birthday. Make sure you know it, because you get cake on your birthday, or at least you should. Make sure you pre-plan activities during your August drill, even if it's a quick here's to the regiment and have some cake. Odds are you've earned it. A lot of soldiers think we popped up in 2006, but really civil affairs has been a branch for almost 70 years. A little bit of a comparison here. As you can see, we're older than MI, SF, Army Aviation, our PSYOPs cousins. Lineage and honors. You should have one of these up somewhere on your wall of your unit, describing all the things that your unit's done over the last 70 odd years that it's been around. If you don't have one of these, look up the info and put it up on the wall yourself. It's important that everyone knows the things that we've done, our past, and why we're cool. Lineage and honors. Again, this shows the 415th, but your unit should have one of these up somewhere. If not, find out what the deal is, get it up on the wall. Everyone should know the cool things that your unit's done throughout history. Winfield Scott, general type. Considered to be the father of civil affairs, while there were earlier portions of civil military operations conducted by the Board of Exploration, various military projects, Lewis and Clark's Corps Discovery Expedition, General Scott's occupation of Mexico City was the first time the military was acting as a governing body. So, bit of history, a fast overview of how that came to be. In 1824, Mexico needed settlers in its northern territories, Texas, and invited Americans to immigrate. But in 1829, Mexico abolished slavery. Texans ignored the law. The American settlers continued pouring in, and in 1830, Mexico forbade further immigration into Texas, and American settlers ignored that as well. Eventually, tensions rose between the Mexican government and the American Texans. When Santa Anna rose to power in 1833, Texans revolted, deciding to fight for independence. Santa Anna marched north in 1836, won at the Alamo, but was later captured in battle, and the Texas Republic was born. Texas claimed independence, but the Mexican government continued to view it as a renegade province run by rebels. Sort of like how Spain and then later France viewed Mexico. The Texans, who wanted more security, asked for American annexation, but in 1836 and 1837, few Americans wanted war with Mexico, which is what annexation would have meant. However, the election of 1840 brought William Henry Harrison to power. Unfortunately, he died within a month. John Tyler took over. To Tyler, annexing Texas and having it join the Union as a slave state was a great idea. Tyler's Secretary of State, Abel P. Upshart, handled the annexation negotiations with Mexico. Sadly, the U.S. Navy killed Secretary of State Upshart in February of 1844, and there was not enough time for the annexation to go forward and for Tyler to claim credit early enough to win re-election. Democrats who were running against Tyler, who was a Whig, went with a compromise nominee, James K. Polk, who narrowly won election. Polk could have settled the border dispute if he'd been so inclined, but he wanted war, having pledged not only to bring Texas into America, but California as well. Polk sent American troops into the disputed territory, hoping to start a confrontation with Mexican troops, which of course happened. The Mexican army was no match for American forces. Both Winfield Scott and Zachary Taylor were very effective commanders and crushed all resistance. Soon enough, Mexico was decisively defeated, Mexico City itself was captured, and this caused a massive headache for everyone. President Polk sent Nicholas Trist to Mexico to negotiate a peace treaty, but the events on the ground rapidly changed. President Polk tried to recall Trist, but Trist refused. Trist sent a strongly worded 65-page letter back to President Polk in which Trist lectured the president and called him a warmonger. Trist stated he would remain in Mexico City and continue to negotiate a peace treaty in his capacity as a private citizen. When this was done, President Polk was free to accept or reject the treaty. Polk wisely chose to just let sleepy dogs lie. However, by 2 February 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed and sent off to Washington, D.C. This caused more problems because now Polk and the Congress were in a bind. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gave President Polk everything he'd asked for at the beginning of the war. For just $16 million to Mexico and absorbing $3.25 million of Mexican debt. However, the House was controlled by anti-war Whigs, and the Senate was split between senators wanting more land and those wanting no land. Those who opposed annexation realized there was no way to reject the treaty without restarting the war, which would bring even more territory under American control. Those who wanted to annex more land realized there were not enough votes to get what they wanted, and that given the next president was probably going to be one of the Whig generals, either Scott or Zachary Taylor, who had won the war, there was a high likelihood that no land whatsoever would be annexed. And so, thanks to pragmatism, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, offered by a dismissed negotiator, unloved by everyone involved, accomplished something no one wanted, really. And it became law on 4 July 1848. Mexico was spared total conquest. General Scott got to keep everything under control between 1847 and 1948, and thusly became the father of civil affairs. Now, there was a bit of CMO in the South after the Civil War, obviously, with Reconstruction and rebuilding what had happened, as well as the new territory of Alaska. Things really took off after the Spanish-American War. Now, a notable exception, of course, is Major General Jefferson Davis, who was appointed the first military governor of Alaska, despite his name, Jefferson Davis, and the fact that he murdered Major General William Bull Nelson when the two of them argued. Lieutenant General Miles served as the first head of the military government established on the island of Puerto Rico, acting as both heads of the Army of Occupation and administrator of civil affairs. Major General Merritt was the first military governor of the Philippines, but quickly moved on to help with the peace talks between the U.S. and Spain in Paris. All right, so Major General Leonard Wood really doesn't need an introduction. He was the military governor of Cuba from 1899 to 1902. Major General Funston was in charge of the occupation of Veracruz in 1914, and with him was an intel captain named MacArthur, and the Marines were led by Lieutenant Colonel Lejeune. Big one here is right after World War I was concluded, the U.S. occupied part of the Rhineland in Germany. Major General Henry Turman Allen was in charge as the military governor, and Colonel I.L. Hunt compiled a 360-odd page report on the activities of the Office of Civil Affairs from December 1st, 1918 to January 10th, 1920. From this, civil affairs doctrine starts to become codified. So the School of Military Governance is established in 1942. You can see some of the various doctrine here. They also created a thing called the Civil Affairs Training School to help beef up the numbers. All right, so the Civil Affairs Training Schools are developed to augment the School of Military Governance, and they get about 6,000 civil affairs and military governance officers in total. From there, in the activities in World War II, you get 3 novels and 3 movies. Belferdano, about the occupation of Sicily, The Tea House of the August Moon, talking about Okinawa, Monuments Men, going with France and Germany. Now, the Cold War starts to kick in about this time, and the capabilities are eroded despite CA becoming a branch in 1955. Now, by Vietnam, unfortunately, military governance at the national level had decreased. Department of State, with Kennedy's really bright guys, had taken over the lead. Now, civil affairs was still there at the local level and helped expand governance and legitimacy. Ran a program called CORDS and other local level governance and stability operations. They were very well received, but again, our abilities have been degraded and replaced. So in 1983, the United States invaded Grenada, helping to rescue a bunch of American medical students following a violent Marxist coup that had been established under the Cubans. Civil affairs teams helped rebuild the Grenadian infrastructure that had fallen into disrepair. And in 1989, the U.S. invaded Panama to protect U.S. interests and to remove General Noriega from power. Civil affairs troops were there, guys from 352, you can see some of the stuff up on the wall, helped U.S. combat forces reestablish law and order, provided support to the new central government and the city government, and managed a refugee camp and assisted in nation-building programs. However, there was still a problem with DOS and who got to do what and what levels. And that, is still an ongoing thing. In Bosnia, CA really got to show their worth. The role and operational impacts allowed the expansion of civil affairs doctrine and abilities. All right, back in 91, Iraq invades Kuwait. Members of the 352 KCOM worked with the government in exile on rebuilding plans via the Kuwait Task Force. Civil affairs personnel played a vital role in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and again, role and operational impact causes further expansion. All right, in the modern era, where they're patrolling in Afghanistan, rebuilding the Baghdad Zoo to include moving lions from Uday Hussein's palace, providing clean water to remote villages, CA is there, and we're leading the way. So here's a picture of civil affairs guys moving one of the lions from Uday's palace. The reason we get to do cool stuff like this is because we're the only ones with the skills and the people who are able to handle these kind of missions. So we get to do them. Right, we have a worldwide mission, whether it's patrolling with park rangers to curb poaching in Africa or help keep a goat herd healthy to improve stability in a local village. Civil affairs is everywhere there's a need, both tactically and strategically. Hope everyone enjoyed that. One of the things I realized that as a civil affairs officer, you are expected to be a cultural expert in order to help out the combatant commander. And as an expert, you're going to have to know the culture. You're going to have to know the language, hopefully. You're going to have to know the history. You're going to have to know the players and the causes. That means you're going to have to read. Since we're talking about civil affairs history, I thought this book might be pretty good for you. It is U.S. Army Counterinsurgency and Contingency Operations from 1860 to 1941 by Andrew J. Birtle. Pretty good book, well worth the read. Recommendation, I'm not telling you to spend your own money. I'm saying that if you want to understand how civil affairs got to where it is today, this would be a good book to have. Besides, where else are you going to learn about that time we invaded Russia?